new year means another season in the Angle Dynasty League. There's been some off-season trades, so today we are going to take a look at the league and see what has gone down. How's it going, everybody? I'm your host, Andrew. Welcome to the Angle Fantasy Basketball Podcast. This is an exciting episode because we have to talk about a groundbreaking trade, a trade that literally broke Fantrax for us for a little bit. This is going to be probably setting the bar of the highest magnitude trade that has happened. And in addition to that, we had another banger of a trade that happened during this offseason as well. So let's get into it. All three of the Angle boys are here in today's podcast. Let's bring them in. First off, Mitchell, sporting an awesome new background. How are you today, dude?
Pretty good. I finally get to hang this bad boy. If you're in any leagues with me, you'll know who my favorite player is. It's Jalen Green. I finally get to hang this up in my new room. So pretty excited. And of course, a lot of different trades happen in this off season, not only you know, throughout the draft, but even after the draft, we've seen a pretty large fluctuation of exciting trades in our league. I mean, since the end of the playoffs, we probably had over 30 trades over the span of like the last 4 or so weeks.
Very good, very good. And of course, our other member of Angle, Braxton. How are you today, dude?
Really good. Really excited, as Mitchell said, to talk through some of the trades and um, yeah, some of the trades you can't go much bigger than some of these ones. So excited to dive into it a little bit further.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So before we get into this, we first have to mention about the league. We did have so the league renewed, and we did have three people leave. So the Dallas Mavericks, owned by Saturday Club, the Geelong Supercats, owned by our friend Maka, and the South Bay Lakers, owned by our friend Javier, departed the league. So thank you to all three of you for participating. We have three new members of the league. We have a new member coming out of Dubai. So HBB, the owner now of Dubai Basketball, shout out to you. Our friend Ralph is now the owner of the Nelson Giants. He's in the league now. And we also have Jolly J Rod, who is the owner of the Boston Celtics. So thank you for those who participated and left. And a very warm welcome to our three new members of this league. Again, as a reminder, this is a 30-team real salary dynasty league. This league contains not only us three, it has other content creators such as from Sports Ethos, from Point Made Basketball, and a ton of very experienced, very active dynasty managers who, are very, very talented within this realm. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's show you what some of these trades have looked like in our league. So here we are. This is the mega trade that happened in our league. And one thing I talked about during podcasts about this league last season was Mitchell's team, the San Miguel Beermen, was doing a great job tanking and really preparing himself for a big swing coming into this season for the 2025-2026 NBA season. In addition to that, Mitchell had a ton of first-round picks that he accumulated. One of them ended up winning the lottery. So he did get access to the draft rights of number 1 overall, which did end up being Cooper Flag. Now let's go over what this trade ended up being. The San Miguel Beermen, Mitchell's team, ended up sending Amen Thompson, Matas Buzelis, and the rights to pick number 1 overall, which ended up being Cooper Flag, to our defending champion Blackwater Bossing in exchange for Victor Wembanyama. So we finally have a Wembanyama trade in this league. Literally shortly after this trade happened, Fantrax completely broke down for us. No one was able to get into the app. No one was able to see exactly what trade happened. Like a few of us caught it early and were freaking out. Everybody else who tried to get onto Fantrax said it wasn't working for them. So we like to say this trade literally broke Fantrax. So this is the number 1 overall dynasty asset getting moved. During the startup draft, Blackwater got first overall in the startup draft pick, and he rightfully took Victor Wembanyama. But this is an insane collection of talent here getting swapped to both sides. Not only Wembanyama, the most generational prospect that we have seen in an extremely long time, going for the generational United States prospect in Cooper Flag, in addition to Amen Thompson and Matas Buzelis. Cooper and Amen Thompson both represent people that we have within the top 20 of our 9-category dynasty ranks. And generally, that's what it takes to get Victor Wembanyama. At least minimum 2 top 20 dynasty assets if you want to get somebody like him. A lot of people have Cooper Flagg somewhere between like 5 to 8 or 9 as a dynasty rank. So a top 10 asset plus a top 20 asset. Modest is within our top 100. We like Modest a lot. We really favor him for a big breakout year. We actually did a video on that recently. I will link it at the end of this video talking about what we expect to be a big breakout performance for Modest in year 2. But just an insane overall collection of talent to send for Victor Wembanyama. And Mitchell was really able to stockpile a ton of draft picks. He still got Dylan Harper in this draft, numerous other first-round picks, as well as some other veterans that he brought in to support as depth around his newly acquired megastar, Victor Wembanyama. So let me bring this to you, Braxton. If you're Blackwater Bossing and you just won the league title without Wembanyama because he was out with the vein blood clotting issue that he had, he was able to really skirt by with taking advantage of silly season play. Justin Edwards, Colby Jones, Josh Giddey at the end of the year, a lot of guys that were on extremely cheap contracts. So he was running 12 deep. I can speak to that from experience for myself because I had to play Blackwater in the final, and it basically felt like 7 players versus 12. And even though I had Shea, I wasn't able to come out on top just due to the overall just waves of depth that was coming in against me. So if Braxton, if you are Blackwater Bossing and you won without Victor Wembanyama, does that make you confident in trading him away? Or is it a mistake because you think, well, if you just won without him, imagine what things are going to be like in the playoffs if you do have Wembanyama?
I love how you framed that question. I actually really like the return on Wemby here. I think, and I always like to think of trades like this in terms of overall production. And it's like, yeah, as you get closer towards those higher end elite assets like Wemby, obviously it requires 2 top 20 guys, like you said. But the thing to consider is, does that the production that you're losing, or I guess in a sense gaining, offset kind of like, is having the production split between 2 guys in Cooper Flagg and Amen Thompson, not to mention Buzelis, does that outweigh everything you get from Wemby? I personally don't think so. So I guess to answer your question directly, I would be confident in trading Wemby away, especially splitting him into 3 pieces like this. Andrew, you know this more than anybody. I always like to kind of tear down off of guys. And I think one kind of diversifying your assets, but also kind of covering your bases in a playoff scenario where you are, 11, 12 deep, having these high-end producers like Cooper Flagg and Amen Thompson outweigh the potential carry from Victor Wembanyama. And again, Andrew, you and I in the industry pickup league last year, it was very top heavy with Wemby and Jokic. And then as we kind of progressed through the playoffs, when you have so much production reliant on one player like that, them missing one game can be catastrophic in a 1-week matchup scenario. So I love this return on Wemby. I personally don't like to hold, and I know when we look at my trade here in a second, it might seem like I'm kind of being a little bit of a hypocrite, but I don't like to hold those high-end assets if I'm not comfortable with my depth. So Blackwater Bossing, part of his issue, I thought, going into last year was his depth, so I love this trade for him.
Okay, so before we move on to you, Mitchell, since you're the one, on one of the ends of making this trade happen, we got to talk about capitalizing on being in a very fortunate situation. So Amen Thompson was Mitch's original startup pick. I know he picked pretty late in our original startup pick. I think it was somewhere in the 20s. So he ended up going with Amen first. Then when our rookie draft happened, Modest fell to him a bit. I want to say it was somewhere between like 10 to 13 where Mitchell was able to grab Modest at. And then
I think I think it was actually 9. I picked him
9?
relatively early. Yeah.
Right. We did
right
have
after
him
Phil's
third
pick.
overall in our big board for last year. And then a pick that Mitchell owned, because this is a pick that like our odds tied to the real NBA odds. So Mitch owned the pick that was tied to the real life Dallas Mavericks, and talk about a fortunate situation for Dallas. ending up landing Cooper Flag, which means Mitchell landed Cooper Flag. So a bit of, really capitalizing on just making huge strides with lottery luck here, landing Modest in a place a lot later than where we had him at, and then having this draft pick that I'm sure Mitch expected this pick to be like, 11 to 14, and it ends up being number 1 overall. So Mitchell, when it became Cooper Flag, was that where you got the green light of I'm going straight for the top here? I'm going for Jokic, I'm going for Wemby, I'm going for Shea, I'm getting one of these guys.
The only person I was considering moving Cooper Flag for was, in fact, Victor Wembanyama. And the reason for this trade, I normally wouldn't do this if I didn't have the depth to kind of compensate for the value I'm sending for Wembanyama. But in my current situation, I had more incoming picks, high profile picks, 1, 2, 5, 10, and I believe 20, 28, and 31, than roster spots available. So this was an easy consolidation for me, especially since I had already a pretty good amount of talent on my roster while I was tanking. I was able to build around like a top-heavy tank method where, I could sit players like a Jalen Suggs or maybe a Jalen Green on most nights. And Jared McCain being hurt definitely helped as well, and Amen Thompson. Um, where I was able to tank and, get pretty good value with these guys. And with that pick that ended up being Cooper Flag, I did actually trade Vince Williams for him. So there was a lot of Vince Williams hype. I didn't entirely buy it at the time. Uh, Moving it for a potential lotto pick definitely really went into my favor here. But yeah, it is a steep price, and this is the only type of deal that you can actually offer a Victor Wembanyama, especially in a salary league, where when you're pretty much offloading other rookie scale talent. You're not able in most situations to trade Victor Wembanyama for, let's say, a Nikola Jokic or um, like a Luka Doncic or whatnot, because a lot of times these teams don't have the available cap space uh, in return. So this trade, yeah, it's on the steep side, but because I had, all those high profile picks, drafting VJ Edgecombe, Dylan Harper, Cedric Howard, and Noah Sengue, I love the foundational youth and talent around Victor Wembanyama, but also, the veteran presence with the Jalen Suggs, where I did send to you, Andrew, for some more depth as well, for the lively pick, Dylan Brooks. So yeah, overall, I think this, is on the surface steep, but I I just had to get Victor Wembanyama in my home league, and this was pretty much a no-brainer for me.
Mitch, I have one question coming out of that. You mentioned you traded Vince Williams for the pick originally. I wanted to ask if you had Vince Williams now, would you still trade him for Cooper Flag?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
And the crazy thing is this wasn't even uh Ben's pick. I didn't receive the pick directly from Ben too. So I got it from someone else who got it from him, which is even
We
funnier.
covered that trade. It was like Zion plus his own pick for Evan Mobley,
Pretty good in the moment.
right? Well, it ended up being Zion plus Cooper Flag for Evan
Yeah,
Mobley,
but it's tough to look at.
of course, hindsight, yes. So no one could have predicted someone that late in the lottery would have jumped up to one. So for sure, not going to blame him there. But it's all about just sacrificing control of your future, control of where your team is at, especially if you don't know if you're like a bona fide like top 5, top 10 team. Generally, I mean, I can't say I did this. I traded my first last year pretty early too. Pretty much around the same time that Hobart traded their first, like in the offseason prior to the season beginning. But it paid. I mean, it turned out because I finished 7th overall, so that pick was in the 20s. Whereas it's just so hard to predict exactly where you're going to be, especially in the startup process of a dynasty. The first year a dynasty takes place, that's most often where you'll see people trade their first round pick just because they're very confident on how their draft went. I mean, it's so hard to predict injuries, other factors that happen in the league, in addition to insane lottery luck. But like you mentioned, Mitch, yes, this is a steep price, but there is no acquiring Victor Wembanyama without a steep price. No one's taking a win-win 50-50 deal. No one's taking a low-ball offer for Wembanyama. Someone's only sending Wembanyama unless they feel like they are coming out of this side on their side of the trade kind of like victorious between the two, like who got the best deal between the two. I really don't think anybody's trading Victor unless they think they're getting a clear win.
100%. And when your starting center is Ben Simmons, you know, I had to do it.
Yeah. And as we saw in the first year of this league, uh, the center position became extremely rare and cutthroat. Like a lot of people had center injuries. There were some specific teams that were hogging a lot of centers on their roster. Shout out to you, Case, over there in Houston. It got to the point where people were paying high prices just to get a body in their center position. That's something that for sure happened to me when I had injuries to Derek Lively, Bobby Portis' suspension. I had Grant Williams for a little bit before his ACL got torn. It just seemed to happen more in this Angle League than it has in other leagues that I've been in. And I don't know if it's just because last year was the startup year and the other leagues I'm in were more established. It could be that reason. But for the most part, not only landing the number one overall dynasty asset, but landing someone who is eligible to play the center position and still on a rookie scale deal, absolutely massive. And I'm not hating at all on the return for Blackwater. I mean, that's the type of return you need for Wemby. Hopefully, Modest gets the big breakout season like we predict him to, especially because Blackwater is a real life Chicago Bulls fan. So that I would honestly love that for him. And maybe something we might cover in a future trade video. He ended up moving on from Cooper Flag for a different asset, but that's something we'll talk about in the future here. So very cool trade to see. This was a groundbreaking trade for us, probably one of the bigger magnitude or biggest magnitude trade that has happened. But let's move on to our next trade, which is pretty also up there in regards to just banger status. So that brings us to this trade right here with some huge names involved. So let's go off with, first off, this is the only team of ours where the owner stayed but changed their team name. This would be Braxton, formerly the New Zealand Breakers, has changed to be the Charlotte Sting. So in this scenario, Braxton traded away Franz Wagner, Karl Anthony Towns, Keontae George, and a 2026 second round pick. He traded them to the Chicago Bulls in exchange for Luka Doncic, LeBron James, Day'Ron Sharpe, and a 2026 first round pick. So back-to-back trades we're covering here for the Angle Dynasty League. A top 4 dynasty player was traded. This happened twice during our offseason. Absolutely insane to see here. So Braxton is now lined up with the complete star power of the Los Angeles Lakers roster, having both Luka Doncic and LeBron James. This is something Braxton's been doing, acquiring LeBron James shares for cheap and just basically riding out the twilight years of his career until he retires, because most people in dynasty settings are willing to let someone like him go for not as much as he should be going for production-wise, purely because of his age. And Braxton's really putting his blinders on here, not caring about the age and more caring about the production. So it sometimes can almost seem like LeBron was a bit of a toss-in in this deal. You needed that salary to match, though, Franz Wagner making almost $40 million and Karl Anthony Towns making $53 million, which is also absolutely wild that two of the players in this deal make more money per year than Luka Doncic does. But anyways, Mitch, I'm going to bring it to you first. So we saw Day'Ron go back to Brooklyn, because this could have been an even huger result if Day'Ron went somewhere where he was going to get a lot of playing time. But Brax did get in the return of the two Lakers stars while sending away Franz Wagner and Karl Anthony Towns. How do you feel about a trade like this one? Let's say if you were on the receiving end getting Luka Doncic here.
Oh man, I'd be ecstatic. Receiving a top 5 asset, someone I always covet in a lot of my dynasty leagues, and being able to get him for this cost, it's a no-brainer for me. Especially something that not a lot of people know is that because Luka was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers, he's not eligible for the Supermax, because the Supermax was intended to keep players for those smaller market teams, in essence. And You get a first round pick on top of someone who's considered a sneaky dynasty asset in Dayron Sharp. I love it for Braxton. Um, Franz Wagner and Karl Anthony Towns, they're good assets, but they're not entirely coveted as someone like a Luka Doncic, where, you put him on the block, you're going to get maybe five or so people hitting your DMs within the first hour. Franz Wagner, there's a hit with the Desmond Bane trade. That usage isn't going to be entirely there. Desmond Bane is a great secondary creator on a, playoff team with the Memphis Grizzlies over the last 3 or so years. So I see like a bit of a dip in production there, especially since it was kind of like a Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum thing with Franz and Paolo. Karl Anthony Towns is actually very underrated as a dynasty asset. I don't think he gets enough love, whether it's because the social media, people think of him as zesty or whatever. I think that kind of hinders his value a bit. But yeah, he's a great dynasty asset. He was once seen in that top five dynasty assets not too long ago, honestly. It was only because of those couple injury seasons during like COVID where his value kind of plummeted a little bit. Keontae George, not a huge fan on him long term, especially since they drafted Walter Clayton Jr. I do get the appeal though if you believe he's a long-term starter, especially because they got rid of Sexton and Clarkson. However, I just don't know if his skill set is a reliable player you could play on the floor on a playoff team when Utah hits their apex. But overall, my position stands on the Charlotte Sting side. I love what they got for what they sent.
Brax, bringing it over to you now. So, for starters, I would love for you to give your own explanation of why you're buying LeBron James stock in Dynasty recently.
Sure.
It's something I've seen you do in multiple leagues. Tell me about this too. Were you aware of the Luka Doncic salary situation, not being able to get the supermax on the Lakers at the time of the trade that you made when you made it?
So before I answer your questions, Andrew, Mitch, I cannot believe you said Cat is undervalued in dynasty leagues because people on Twitter think he's zesty. That is the craziest take I may
It's
have
kind
heard.
of true though.
That is,
Well,
I
it's like
cannot
that.
believe.
It's the zesty thing, and then they'll have the
Dude.
talk about him being exposed in playoffs, which real life
Okay.
basketball playoffs doesn't matter
And
in
like
dynasty.
people just don't like him. He kind of gets
Sure.
that Trey Young type of repertoire where, if they don't like him in real life, they don't like him in dynasty value.
Okay. All right. Dude, if somebody said that to me, try like in a trade negotiation or something, like this guy is not being serious at all. But Andrew, to answer your question, LeBron, I know from personal experience, he is borderline untradeable in especially the salary 30 team leagues that we play in. I have him in over 75% of the leagues that I play in. I don't play in a particularly high number of leagues, but it's still significant. And I he's like you said, he's just undervalued. I mean, well, if you can fit the salary, the way that I kind of view this is that when he retires, if you have a first round pick to burn, you can always just buy a high salaried vet from somebody who is way over cap because there's always a few teams who have kind of just pushed all their chips in for 1 year, and then the league kind of rolls over and they're $40 million over cap space, and then that's how you get like a LeBron for a singular first or even less in some cases. I've a couple years ago even I bought LeBron for less than that. So the production significantly outweighs the risk of retirement and declining. And that's reflected in our dynasty ranking of him. We all three still have him inside the top 100, where in a trade, you probably will not get a top 100 piece for him. So he's one of those guys who are always going to be more valuable on your team than you would ever get in a trade. Specific to this trade, well, actually, let me answer the question about Luka first. Yes, I was aware of that, and that was a big motivation for me. On top of just having kind of the Lakers duo, I thought that was really fun. But that was a big motivation for me for acquiring Luka, and there was quite the bidding war going on for Luka. And I like to think that I came out on top because I was the only one who gave any kind of value for LeBron. The Bulls were kind of trying to take his his team in a different direction, pivoting away from LeBron. And some of the offers that I became privy to were not willing to give him anything, period, for LeBron, or could not take his salary on. So I like to think the fact that I gave some value there heavily played a part, heavily contributed, I should say, into me being able to, agree to this trade with him. Additionally, I from the other side, I'm looking at it as okay. You're getting more longevity, right? LeBron has 1 or 2 years left. I would say maybe two at this point, but you're kind of swapping that immediate production for that longevity of Karl Anthony Towns and Franz Wagner, who still will probably be very fantasy relevant within 4 years or something like that, right? So me personally, I'm not thinking further than 2 years out in any given scenario. That's just the way that I play Dynasty basketball. So that played a heavy part in me acquiring LeBron here. And I prefer LeBron to some of the older vets like Paul George, obviously, or like Kawhi for obvious reasons, right? He just, one, produces at a higher level, has shown that he's more consistent on the court. And just for some reason, I feel like, they're not going to rest LeBron. They would the same way they would with some of these other older guys who are still fantasy relevant, like Jimmy Butler is another one, right? Jimmy Butler, you cannot get probably literally anything for at this point either. Just LeBron is somebody that I like. I think the reward outweighs any risk that comes with him and his age, and I'm not worried about his retirement.
I mean, yeah, top 30 season from LeBron. He's still going at it. An absolutely just genetic freak. It's something it's really unprecedented. We've never seen someone at his age produce at the level he's producing at. So, yes, in 2 years, this becomes Franz, Cat, Keontae, and a second for Luka, Sharp, and a first. But I more appreciate that mindset of really focusing more on like a 2 to 3 year outlook. So often guys play Dynasty with like a 7 to 8 year outlook. And really it's just like, think about it this way. It's like, think about how long it would take for you to make back your league buy-in fee of 7 years. So let's say it's a $50 buy-in league. 50 times 7, how long is it going to take you to make that money back in winnings if you really focused on, let's say, a 5 to 6, 7 year build out plan for your league? Also think about how long your league's going to even be around for. Obviously, the Angle Dynasty League is going to exist until the end of time, but there's plenty of leagues out there where the average age of that league before it fully collapses is like 4 to 5 years. And then those people who are playing with like a 6-7 year strategy, which not everybody does, but it does happen. They pretty much just lose out on all their money and don't really gain anything back. And that's the main goal here of fantasy. Yes, we all are huge basketball fans. Yes, we all love following our players on our dynasty roster. We love, interacting with people from all over the world. Like, in what other scenario are us three interacting with people living in Dubai, Australia, Germany, Portugal? That's all contained within our league right now. But the goal is still to win money. And that's where I think focusing more on like a 2 to 3 year outlook is the plan. Like, look at Blackwater Bossing. Last year, he really pushed all of his chips into the middle of the table to get that win, to get that $800 first prize. And he got it. Regardless of the salary situation it put him in for this year, this is going to cover his league buy-in fee for the next 10 plus years if he wants to work it out that way. So I like that comment about, just the window of what you're looking at competitive wise and like kind of what your mindset is with a league for Dynasty overall. So let's move on to our next pick.
One more comment real quick on age in Dynasty leagues, if that's cool. I some of the things you said, I just wanted to add on to.
Yep.
I mean, and we can go on forever about this, but there's just like kind of this stigma where guys turn 30 years old, for example, and people want nothing to do with them anymore. So like, just to add on to what you said, just because somebody is 33 or 34 years old, I think DeMar DeRozan is another good example of someone who can still provide elite production, who is significantly undervalued in dynasty leagues. Chris Paul is another one who may have kind of swung the other direction. I think people were so low on him, and then he played 82 games, and now he's kind of maybe where he should be. But I guess I just wanted to make a point of, do not be scared off by the age. And that 2 to 3 window, Andrew, like you mentioned, is something that I think more people should be looking at.
Exactly. All right. Now we are moving on to our third trade here. So we have 3 more trades to cover. Unfortunately, these ones don't involve top 4 assets anymore, but they do involve some pretty big names here. So Mine and Mitchell's close friend and golf buddy Lambert, the owner of the Kanazawa Samurais, he sent away OG Anunoby, Stefan Castle, and a 2026 first round pick in exchange for Jalen Williams, J-Dub, from our friend Joy, the owner of the Singapore Slingers, who is an OKC fan. So I'm actually kind of surprised to see him trade away J-Dub, but maybe he was trying to do this before his extension kicks in. However, he's bringing in OG Anunoby, who's making already around $40 million per year. So that brings in the question of, would you rather have J-Dub making $40 million or OG Anunoby making $40-ish million per year? But
Wait,
this is
Andrew.
a trade. Go ahead.
Yeah. How come? So you know how J-Dub and Paolo are in the same draft class and they're both rookie extension eligible?
Mm-hmm.
Would J-Dub, let's say he gets max money, is that contract the same? Or is Paolo's number higher because he hit a certain criteria of like all NBA? I just don't know, but that's a good point. Because if it is 40 million, great. But if it's 57 million annually over the next 4 or 5 years, well, I don't know.
I see. I see your point. Okay. Okay. I mean, I don't know if there's additional accolades for Jalen Williams' playoff performance or winning a title with OKC as well, too. I don't know if that factors into pay raises at all, too. But so it is possible for sure that Jalen Williams is going to make more than LG Anunoby within the next like 2-3 years here. That is definitely possible. So factoring in OG plus Castle, it's around 50-ish million. And then J-Dub is on 6.6. So since he is in the same class as Paolo, I know as a Paolo owner in one of my leagues that you got one year left of the rookie scale deal before the big one kicks in. And I mean, OKC just paid Shea, and there's no way they're going to be able to pay Shea, J-Dub, and Chet and still retain Hartenstein. So you will see at least the main championship core break up at some point, and we still have yet to see what the exact rookie max extension is going to look like for J-Dub. I believe he did make the All-Star team. He did.
I got it. It's his max is gonna be 5,296 as he did reach an All NBA team. So it's gonna be 5,296, which is what, about almost 60 million average per. So
Ooh. Okay, so Joy might actually be saving some money here then. In addition to Steph Castle being cost controlled for another 3 years.
Wow, that's going to be more than Paolo's deal because Paolo's deal is 5 years, 239. That's insane. That's insane
Okay.
money for J-Dub.
Okay. Damn, now I'm just envisioning Joy going over a crystal ball, trying to really see into the future and
Well,
kind of dodge, at least
it's
20
it's
million
not
cap space.
it's not what he did this season. It's if he reaches all NBA or MVP or Defensive Player of the Year. Those are the clauses for next season. Then he'll get that bump from 247 to 296.
If he makes at
Well,
least all NBA again.
no, Jalen Williams has already met that criteria on his rookie contract, and we don't have to get too into the semantics because Paolo has not met that criteria. His is a 5,239 currently, but can go to
Oh,
5,287 if he does, make All NBA or make the All Defensive Team or MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, etc. So as it stands right now, Paolo is 5,239, can go up, but as it stands right now, Jalen Williams is 5,296 if he were to sign that contract. Obviously, it hasn't been
oh
signed.
my gosh, that's gross. I mean, I
But
love
J-Dub
J-Dub. I
is
love
good though.
J-Dub. He's very good. I mean, I think he's in Brax's top 10, top 15 for us, but when you're making 290, how much is that annually?
It's like 58 or 59 or something like that, average. Obviously, it'll probably be increasing, but it's around there.
And I know
59
the
and
salary
change.
cap's going to increase each year, but teams were making some trades this year in anticipation that the salary cap's not going to increase as much as everybody initially thought it would. So, there is going to be some dollars and cents really getting squeezed out here in the next 2 to 3 years for specific teams. I mean, that's why you see OKC still making first round draft picks and keeping names like Nikola Topic instead of going like, oh, let's just trade them all for another star, win another ring right away. Because then the dynasty's over in about a year once you get past that point. Whereas instead, let's say one of J-Dub or Chet does walk, you still have Topic. You still have Thomas Sorter. Kason Wallace is probably still on the team as well, too, at that point. Maybe you're able to retain Hartenstein on a different deal after that too. So, OKC is planning for basically just their team is too good for their own, like too good to just retain together. It seems almost impossible to retain that entire amount of talent together. But let me ask you both this. Is OG Anunoby reasonably priced in a salary league, or is he overpriced?
He's overpriced. Obviously in a nine cat format, and I've talked about this probably 100 times. His impact is lower than his actual nine category ranking. So he's got like the perfect skill set for nine category with that low turnovers. Can be efficient, right? He's got steals, threes, did a little bit of everything. But his actual impact, especially in these 30 team leagues where, I view the raw stats as being more important than nine category ranking. OG is somebody who's already overrated, and then seeing him on this contract is not my favorite for the value he brings to your team. If you're spending that money, you want somebody who maybe has a little bit more of a diverse skill set or somebody who can be one of the better players on your team. And I don't think OG can be that.
Right. And I guess,
Right, because
go ahead, Mitch.
there are nights where OG will give you literally nothing, right? Because a lot of his value is on those like efficiency stats, high steal numbers, which can fluctuate from game to game. But I will not accept OG slander because Andrew, as you know, in our redraft league, OG was probably my second best player or third best player behind Kevin Durant and James Harden, and he did lead me to a title. Uh, so
Okay, that's fair. But I'm saying it's specifically in these 30 team leagues where you can't craft a build as much, right? If you're in a 12 or a
right,
14, that's fine. He can be one of your better players. But in a 30 team league where it's like you need to have some guys who do everything and then some guys supplementing them, and you're not really going for a particular build, that's where I don't like OG is when you get to that 16, 20, 24 type range in terms of teams in a league. But so, Mitch, I understand what you're saying. And in the right build, he can be an elite contributor. But a lot of times, as I just said, in these leagues that deep, you don't really get the opportunity to have a build, right? Just based on, you have 10, 11 players, 12 players who actually are playing, and there's none on free agency. So
That's true. And one thing that will be mentioned as well is that Kanazawa sent control of his own 2026 first round pick in this deal. That's who that 2026 pick belongs to, is himself. And he squeaked into playoffs as the 14 seed last year. So that means he's one away from being a lottery pick as of last year. So this is also sacrificing some depth in return for the star power of J-Dub. But he does need things to go right to ensure that he is a playoff team again, because we just saw somebody with very low odds at getting number one, aka the Dallas Mavericks, end up getting the first overall pick. So as long as Lambert, Kanazawa, Samurais can avoid falling out of the playoffs, then I do at least like getting somebody like J-Dub as an upgrade over OG. I mean, I still love Steph Castle as well, too. I'm not really worried about, let's say, Dylan Harper getting there. It's more so, can Kanazawa still stay in the playoff picture despite losing a little bit of depth and despite losing control of his own first-round pick for coming into next season? Okay, so let's move on to our next trade here. This is a fun one because this trade happened live on air during our first ever Angle live stream. So we did a live stream for the first round of the NBA draft for 2025. We had a ton of fun with that one. Hopefully you were there live, because that's the only time that it was available public to everybody. And now the full recording of that session is only available exclusively on our Patreon. So this trade was discussed during, within the live chat of our YouTube feed while this video was going on. So let's talk about what happened here. The Los Angeles Lakers, shout out to my boy Phil, traded away DeJounte Murray and pick 16 in exchange for Anthony Simons and pick 20, which came from the Toronto Raptors. Shout out to our boy Slice. So Slice is someone who likes to wheel and deal. I know him from, actually I met him in a Dynasty Hockey League that I'm in. He's a great guru for me with making hockey moves. I, in exchange, help him out with basketball moves. And I think this was a win-win for both sides, because Toronto is currently going to be tanking in this next season because he was the owner of Jason Tatum, and now he has DeJounte Murray. So he's got the double Achilles tear team. And he was able to move up a few picks in this draft to pick number 16 with this pick. pick, and then Phil with the Lakers moved back to pick 20. Brax, we did, of course, that pod dedicated solely to Anthony Simons on our Patreon, as he was our July Player of the Month after getting moved to the Boston Celtics. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head if he was on Boston at the time of this trade or not. I think he was. But let's go to you first. What do you feel about like a deal like this? Do you agree with me, or do you think it's kind of a win-win for both sides? One's turning competitive this year, one is tanking this year.
I think with that context, it makes a lot of sense. Kind of in a vacuum, I really like the Simons trade, or excuse me, Simons side a lot. That drop from 16 to 20 is not super significant in my opinion. And I think Simons has a shot to outperform DeJounte Murray this coming season. When, even when DeJounte is able to return from injury. Um, I think in Boston, and as we talk about in our breakdown of him, as you just mentioned on Patreon, I really think he is due for a lot of positive regression in some of his categories, to get back to some of his earlier career levels. And yeah, I don't know. I just don't like DeJounte. He was super inefficient in his time last year. Who knows what's going to go on with this Pelicans team with this new front office? And Simons is due for a new deal, but if he stays in Boston, I think there's a lot of opportunity there for him to increase his efficiency, where he's not taking as many shots, but they're better shots, not necessarily this year, but maybe moving forward. So yeah, bring pretty even, but if I had to pick one, I'd take the Simons side.
What are your thoughts, Mitch?
Well, I mean, in a vacuum, it is definitely pretty even, but when you understand and you live through the league, you get to see what pick 1.16 turned into. Pick 16, who was given to Slice in this trade, was sent over for Yves Missi, a projected starting center, may lose his job over time to Derek Queen. Time will tell, but also a future first round pick. So you're essentially getting, you know, two really solid value pieces on top of DeJounte Murray, who may or may not, recover. But on the bright side, he does have a great contract in salary leagues. So I think Slice did a pretty good job with his return and utilizing that pick for diversifying his assets moving forward. I'm gonna have to I really can't decide, but knowing what happened with the pick, because someone really wanted Hanson Yang at 16, I like that side for the Toronto Raptors.
Well, I didn't know we were factoring in subsequent trades. I mean, I'll take the
Hey, like I said,
EVC.
Slice likes to wheel and deal, man. You know he had a plan with 16.
If we want to do that as well, I like the Misi and 16, or excuse me, and future first, along with DeJounte Murray. So if we want to factor that in as well, I do like that side.
Okay, and so in a vacuum, the trade's fairly even, maybe leaning towards the Simon side, but we all three can agree we really like Slice. If you're listening, we really like what you did with pick 16 after that. That's how you properly manage a tanking team, because he gets to start Jason Tatum and DeJounte Murray, who will be putting up zeros basically throughout the entire year. That's going to help him take towards the bottom in anticipation of an absolutely stacked 2026 draft class. In addition to that, he brought in Yves Missi, a center that we like. Even though, yes, there's other centers competing in New Orleans right now. New Orleans is a little bit of a mess, but Yves Missi really represents the only actual rim running center and kind of defensively reliant center that's still there. So I like him still. Plus, we just saw this happen with Mitchell. He got a 2025 first round pick. He wasn't exactly sure what it was going to be. This was at the beginning of last year, and it ended up being Cooper Flag. So what if Slice just got AJ DeBanza or somebody or the Boozer kid, something along those lines, with that pick that he acquired in this deal, just to give up the right to draft Hanson Yang? So in a vacuum, and also shout out to these guys for putting this trade or making this trade happen live on air during our first live stream. That was awesome, very fun to see. I think it was a great win-win trade for both sides, and of course, Slice, we like what you did with pick 16 afterwards too. All right, let's go on to our final trade here to discuss. Now, this is something that's going to be a kind of a more of a debated trade, because We are playing in a 9 category league, and 9 category more heavily favors, way more heavily favors one person in this deal. So let's get through this. The Beijing Ducks traded away Dyson Daniels and pick number 24 in exchange for Paulo Banchero and a 2026 second round pick. So this trade also involved Velez Sarsfield. Shout out to Adrian. Shout out to Sir Eats, the owner of the Beijing Ducks. So ooh, this is a tough one because Dyson Daniels did have an amazing 9 category year. Absolutely amazing 9 category year. Paulo Banchero did not have an absolutely amazing 9 category year. Paulo Banchero for sure is somebody that should be more favored in a points league setting as opposed to a 9 category setting. But I want to bring this question to you first, Mitch. This is a two-part question. Number one, how easily replicable do you think 3 steals per game is? This is referring to Dyson Daniels here. Number two, do you think Paolo was affected by that pectoral injury and might have a pretty good bounce back year here in 2025?
Was it a pectoral injury? So I think it was a quad injury.
Oh, my apologies. I thought it was his pec. His pec. Okay, quad injury.
So yeah, to answer your first question, Dyson Daniels is an elite defender in the point of attack. He's great at, reading the passing lanes and anticipating deflections. Steals is one of the most highly fluctuated categories. We've seen it with Gary Trent, who averaged like 2.2 steals, and then the following year he's at like 1.2. It happens. But Dyson is definitely a special defender. I don't think it'll dip too far off from 2 steals a game. If it does, 3 steals is pretty unbelievable. It's an anomaly, really. We haven't seen it in such a long time. In terms of Paulo, he did recover very well from his injury. I think to finish the last 2 months of the season, I'm looking at Basketball Monster right now. He actually finished in the top 50 for being someone who has all those deficiencies within those efficiency uh, categories. He averaged 29 points a game, 2.1 threes a game, 7.8 rebounds a game, 4.5 assists, zero point 0.9 steals, and zero point 0.4 blocks. That's pretty incredible. When you talk about valuing stats, this is a type of anchor who is a triple double threat at any given basis, day to day, game to game. It's hard because Dyson is such a specialist in one thing. He does have some tertiary stats, but Paulo, we've seen the progress and improvement of efficiency over the last couple of seasons, especially the field goal. He's taking easier shots at the rim, and that's what's really going to make or break the value. But after hearing the contract extension, that's where it kind of maybe shifts it a little bit more on the even standpoint of this trade, knowing that Paulo is going to be getting 53 or 57 million a year versus Dyson probably get like 30 to 35 million dollars a year. So you do have to factor that in because in real life, you know, everyone's going to say the Paulo side wins in a landslide, but in fantasy, because of, you value specific statistical categories, not real life impact, this is definitely a bit more even, especially since you are getting a first round pick in return. Who knows what that can be? You may hit, and the value of those two assets could definitely top over Paolo Banchero and a second who could be in the 50s. A complete wash at that point. But for me, I if I had to lean to one, I'd say slightly Paulo, just because of what he can provide you in terms of volume.
Brax, how do you feel about this one?
Uh, I mean, I think the issue I have with this is the first on top of Dyson Daniels. That first turned into it actually ended up in my hands somehow, and it turned into Danny Wolf. And factoring that part in, and I think Wolf is pretty good. I'm taking the Dyson side pretty easily. Mitch, I thought the point you made about uh, Paolo being a triple double threat was pretty interesting because I mean Dyson Daniels was almost a nightly. He's flirting with a triple double nightly himself. I mean he's averaging 6 boards per game, 4.5 assists on top of the 3 steals and the point 0.7 blocks that he has. Right, so his free throw percentage was at 59, but one, he still ranked inside the top 40 in 9 category leagues on the season with that free throw percentage, obviously because of the steals, right? But two, he's taking under 2 free throws per game, right? A big issue with Paolo is the things that he does poorly, he does it in such high volume. Right. So the free throws, the amount of free throws he's taking per game are 8.4, and he's shooting 72% from the line. Right. That's harmful. That's going to hurt you. A lot. Somebody who misses 3 free throws any given night, or I guess 2.5 in Paolo's instance, is bad. I mean, the points make Paolo a little bit of the flashier player. But he had nights where he would ruin your field goal percentage in addition to your free throw percentage. Factoring in even the contract extension you mentioned, Mitch. I'm taking the Dyson side super easily. And for the record, Paolo did not have any triple doubles last year. He actually only has two in his career. While and not to make this about triple doubles, but while Dyson himself does not have any triple doubles either. But I just think they're kind of on the same playing field there in terms of that. If Dyson's able to get his free throw percentage up closer to like 65, where he shot his rookie year and the year before, who knows what? I mean, the sky is the limit for this guy in terms of his ranking, especially with the quality of the shots he's taking, shooting almost 50% from the field. It's Dyson, no question for me.
This is one where it's a bit of, like, debatable because I do think that people are for sure underselling Paolo after last year. I'm well aware in the 9 category format that there is efficiency issues, which is what most affects his ranking within that system. But just the overall volume of what he can provide is something that can't be ignored. It is star level volume. And that's the kind of treatment he's getting with Orlando, especially with the contract that he just got from him, too. So this is something where I don't know. I almost sit a little bit more even on this because I want, number one, want to see if Dyson can still replicate that insanely high steals rate. And also, two, I'm pretty fairly confidently betting on a potential bounce back from Paolo Banchero as well. Mitch, I know you're a fan of Paolo, so it's something where it's hard for me to decide what's more likely: Dyson retaining those steals or Paolo having a bounce back. If I had to guess, I would think it's Paolo having a bounce back, and that's mostly just because the precedent of 3 steals per game is crazy. Crazy, especially if he retains at least above 2.7 steals per game this next upcoming season, then Dyson Daniels is going to be an official steals god. He's going to be one of
And
the best steals assets you can possibly get.
Okay, can
steals
I?
is also one of the easiest thing you can find on the wire in streaming. There's a lot of guys like you can find Brandon Boston who averaged 1.2 steals a game. Some guys can erupt out of nowhere from the waivers and you can just stream that. But you can't replicate potentially 30 points per game on any given night.
I
That's
mean,
the most scarce statistic and the most widely valued. I know it's only one category, but in terms of a league setting, you want those apex scorers, and you can only find those at the top of the draft.
Can I just, Andrew, you said bounce back for Paolo. I don't know if I understand what he's supposed to bounce back to. I mean, it was a career high for him in points and rebounds. I mean, the assists did tick down a little bit, but everything else was much of the same for him in his career.
More
And
so the
even,
efficiency
right.
is what I'm referring to.
Okay. I mean, and maybe that's just semantics on using the word bounce back, but just like, I don't know. He gets to the line way too much. I just think the negatives for Paolo outweigh the positive. And I'm not knocking, I mean, Paolo has a place on the right fantasy teams, but specifically compared to Dyson Daniels, I think the negatives outweigh any potential positives that he would bring here. And I get that it's almost doubling the amount of points, right? But I don't know. I just it's not my favorite. But I'm not a huge Paolo guy in category basketball anyway. So
I,
All
I
right,
just want
sweet.
to kind of reinstate the contract extension kind of really validates that Paulo is that number one guy for the Orlando Magic. His role isn't going to reduce anytime soon. The Atlanta Hawks definitely buffered their depth, signing Nikhil Alexander-Walker, Kristaps Porzingis, a lot of guys who need the ball in their hands in their own right. Jalen Johnson's hopefully going to finally be healthy for a full season. Who knows if Dyson's going to have the same amount of touches on a team that's looking to really contend in an open Eastern Conference this year.
I mean, Mitch, but you could say the same thing about Orlando, and they just brought in Desmond Bane, who is going to command even more touches than Nikhil
I,
Alexander-Walker and Porzingis combined, right?
I
Who
wouldn't
are
I
also
wouldn't say
competing.
that for Desmond Bane because Paolo has already established himself as that number one guy. If anything, he takes away from Franz Wagner, who's that 1B to Paolo's 1A. And this is someone who watches a lot of Orlando Magic games. So I just don't think the Desmond Bane effect will really take a hindrance on Paulo's production. It's
Sure.
more so on the front side versus a Dyson who's a more of a kind of a tertiary playmaker, adding guys like a Kristaps Porzingis and a Nikhil Alexander-Walker, where they really didn't have any backcourt depth at all after Dyson and Trae Young. So I think the additions in the free agency and offseason have affected Dyson more so than Apollo.
All right. So still kind of a hotly contested trade between us on that last one, but that wraps up the 5 trades that we're going to discuss today. We are on the road to 500 YouTube subscribers. We are just about to hit 400. If you like this channel, if you like what we do, we would please ask that you help us out by subscribing to the channel. Let's get us up to those 500 YouTube subscribers. That would be greatly appreciated so we can bring you guys more content, more Dynasty League discussion, as well as also, of course, covering happenings and things going on in the Angle Dynasty League, give you guys some insight into a very competitive, healthy Dynasty League. So that will do it for us today. Make sure to check out anglefantasybasketball.wordpress.com for all of our content. We also have a Patreon, which we will link in the description below, which involves bonus content. So this is on top of all the free content that we already put out there. Again, if you could subscribe to this channel, that would be a huge help. And we will see you guys next time.